This episode of The Construction Record is brought to you by the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. Clean water is everybody's business.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 67 of the Construction Record podcast. This is Vince Versace, National Managing Editor of the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce, joining you today from our Markham studio. This podcast is supported by Conexpo ConAg. Check out North America's largest construction show, which will hit the stage in Las Vegas from March 10th to the 14th, 2020. With over 2,000 exhibitors, there will be a lot to see and do at this show. So remember, if you want to register, you can save 40% on show admission if you register by January 17th. As it concerns Conexpo, a reminder that this podcast, the Construction Record Podcast, is a supporting podcast of the show, and we're going to be on the ground there in Las Vegas in March of next year, and we're really looking forward to it. It's an honor and privilege that we were asked to be supporting podcasts of North America's largest construction trade show. You'll have Warren Frey, Digital Media Editor of the Journal of Commerce, and myself there in Las Vegas, covering the stories and issues that are going to be everywhere to be seen on the trade show floor and in the education centers sessions that have been organized. We really look forward to it as we head into the build-up to Conexpo. We start to learn a bit more about the sessions that are going to be held there, and I'm excited about one particular session which covers the 10 reasons why construction companies fail. The session is going to be held by Larry Kochlenberg of Leith Group. He's going to give his 10 reasons why he believes construction companies fail and what businesses can do to fix this. This is some of that key business intel that you can get at Conexpo ConAg. Maybe it's just one or two things that Larry may say in this session that will get a business owner to kind of reflect on his current operations and go, you know what, maybe I got to change my path a little bit if I want to succeed. Considering the North American construction economy is particularly made up by a majority of small to medium firms with employees from 5 to 30, essentially, depending on which data you look at, these type of sessions are important. As well, attending the trade show, you get to learn a lot about building products, materials, connecting, networking. And it's seeing that in action, which excites us at the Construction Record to be there, to relate to other stakeholders in the industry and tell stories, because there may be lessons learned that could deliver a little nugget that could change a path for somebody in their construction business. And we really look forward to kind of sharing those stories with you and learning about them ourselves. So once again, do remember, if you want to register for Conexpo ConAg, all you need to do is register by January 17th, and you can save 40% on your admission. So do remember to look at that. You could go to conexpoconag.com to find out more information around registration and just the show. So that once again, that's conexpoconag, ag being AGG.com, if you want to learn a bit more information about this massive show that's going to be happening in March in Vegas in 2020. And as it concerns major shows that we're involved in, just recently the Journal of Commerce continued its ongoing support and sponsorship of the Vancouver Regional Construction Association's Awards of Excellence. These awards started 31 years ago. Our publisher, Brian Martin, who was heading up the JOC back then, actually came up with the idea about rewarding construction excellence in British Columbia. 31 years ago, it was just one award that was awarded. And now the event has blossomed into the signature event in BC throughout the year. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of projects being recognized. Hundreds of projects being recognized, whether it's through the build-up in the nomination process to the final awards night gala. We continued our media sponsorship and support of the event. And in particular, we continued to present a couple of awards at the event as well. I had the honor to be there again this year and was asked to present 2 awards, the final 2 awards of the evening. The first one was for projects valued between 15 and 50 million. And the second award, the grand prize award that closes the night, is for projects valued over 50 million. As it concerns the project between $15 and $50 million, that winner there was Grand Design Builders LP for their Aldergrove Credit Union Community Center. A great project, all-encompassing, a game changer for the community where it was opened. Definitely, if you want to learn more about it, visit joconl.com, and you can find our VRCA awards feature, and you can find a bit more. Or if you just go to joconl.com, in the search bar, type in Aldergrove Credit Union Community Center, and you'll find our reporting on that project. As it concerned the grand prize of the evening, it was a pleasure for me to present the award to Bird Construction Group for their SFU Sustainable Energy Engineering building. This building is iconic already. It is beautiful, beautiful design, beautiful thought process on how the building flows for students and workers who are attending it or walking through it or attending classes. Beautiful project. Once again, if you want to learn about that, go to joconl.com. In the search bar, you can just type in SFU Sustainable. Our story will come up. Or look for, once again, our VRCA awards feature, which is also on the JOC website. Can't tell you enough how much we love to interact with the industry here at the DCN and JOC. On the Daily Commercial News side, upcoming is going to be the National P3 Conference held by the Canadian Council of Public-Private Partnerships. For that conference, we actually produce a publication called the P3 Daily Reporter. It's available in print on the first day of the show, and then it's available digitally for both the first and second day of the show, and we create a wrap-up podcast for it later in the week of which that show is held. You'll learn more about the P3 conference as we lead towards it. It's this November. We'll have some feature interviews leading up to it. So stay tuned to the Construction Record podcast for that and for all your other construction news and needs. With that, I'm going to throw to the Burnaby studio. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vince. It's me, Warren Frey, the digital media editor at the Journal of Commerce.
And I'm Russell Hixson, staff writer at the Journal of Commerce.
And a lot has been happening, including the federal election. But why don't you start with, Russ, with what you've been doing?
Well, I wrote a piece about the Alberta budget, which was a shock to some people in the industry. I chatted with the Alberta Construction Association about it, and they kind of had some warnings about it. They think it's going to hurt families, and it's going to hurt the construction sector. So the budget includes a $2.8 billion cut from the previous government's budget for its capital projects. They also are kind of slowing payments for the two major LRT projects in the province, which are the Valley Line and the Green Line LRT in Edmonton and Calgary, which they promised $3 billion, but yeah, they're going to spread that out over several years. And I think they've kind of managed to tick off a lot of different stakeholders. You have both mayors, the mayors of Edmonton and Calgary, coming out with very strong statements against this. Very dramatic. Mayor Nenshi of Calgary actually crumpled up a piece of paper and said the promises that were made to him have been broken.
And this was a government that, from what I gathered previous to the election, everybody we talked to said that they were looking forward to these guys getting in because they've been more pro-business, and that seems to have kind of backfired on them.
I remember a lot of optimism about Kenny, but now that they've come for kind of infrastructure spending, it's going to hurt people, and especially smaller infrastructure spending. I mean, the LRT funding is frustrating for some contractors, but when I talked to the ACA, they said that, these large P3 projects, these large LRT projects, those are only for some major, contractors, and their kind of day-to-day members, which are like small to medium-sized, businesses, they're not really going to necessarily be able to work on those projects.
But a bridge or something or whatever.
Yeah, but then you have the Municipal Sustainability Initiative funding, which is taking a huge cut of, I think, $236 million over the next several years. That's upset a lot of municipalities, and some of that smaller infrastructure spending that's going to hurt kind of a lot of these smaller businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't talk to them. They released a statement. The Alberta Urban Municipalities Association released a statement on this, and they were pretty unhappy with it. They said the cuts are going to lead to a crumbling community infrastructure and possibly higher taxes for property owners for years to come. That's what they said about the MSI cuts.
And the thing about Alberta is it's cold. I can say from first-hand experience, having grown up in Edmonton, the roads after a winter are in rough shape.
Right.
Let alone letting that go fallow. It's not gonna please people. Let's put it that way.
And to be fair to Kenny, he said this is the most important budget in the last 25 years. And he says it's partially a response to the Trudeau administration getting reelected. And he said Trudeau's actively campaigned against the province's prosperity. He said the budget is intended to increase the province's self-reliance. So it's
not a austerity budget like the Brits did, basically.
Some tough love, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose.
And he believes it's it's going to hurt, but it's going to be important for the long run, I suppose. So we'll see what happens, but. A lot in the construction community are pretty concerned about this with an industry that's already faced, years of kind of hardship.
That's true.
And on a lighter note, I went and toured a dairy-free foods production facility.
A huge one.
A huge one. It's 400,000 square feet in the heart of Burnaby, BC, for Daiya. I think it's Daiya.
I think it's. Let's say it. We're
going to say Daiya. It's Daiya Foods. They produce dairy-free alternatives for cheese and dressing, and they have dozens and dozens of different products. But they were rapidly outgrowing their 60,000 square foot facility, and so they needed a new facility. And they took this old brick warehouse, and they have been renovating it and hanging all their new stuff off of new steel structure they had to put in. It's pretty interesting. And also the interesting thing about it too is when you have a facility that produces, food that's going to be shipped internationally, you have to adhere to, half a dozen different, food standards in the way that you prepare it and the air, temperature and different facility requirements that all have to be kept track of.
Right.
And I spoke with the Wales McClellan project manager that was involved in it. And his name was Alan Goertson. I hope I'm saying that right. And he explained, not only do you have to keep track of all these standards, but once you build it, it's not like you can go back and, add stuff like, oops, I forgot to do this.
No.
It's very, very difficult to go back and do that.
Very precise, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's very precise. And, so another interesting part of this project is how it highlights a growing problem in Metro Vancouver, which is the scarcity of industrial land, which is accelerating. It's getting more and more scarce. And I spoke with Bill Rempel from Blackwood Partners, and he helped put together the lease agreement for this facility. And he said it was one of only, I think, 2 properties over 100,000 square feet in kind of the Vancouver area.
That's hard to wrap your head around.
That were available, and so this Daiya got very lucky, and he also noted that had they waited a year or so to sign this lease, it probably would have cost them 20% more. That's how fast the expense for these properties is growing up.
Forget about residential. This is
because they're just getting more and more rare.
Contentious.
Yeah, and he explained that a lot of this is Amazon and other kind of fulfillment and distribution centers are putting a lot of upward pressure on the market for these, and it's only going to get worse. So, I don't know. Maybe these companies are going to have to move further away from kind of the city core. I know I did a story a few months ago about a stacked industrial project in East Vancouver, and they're trying to restore kind of the industrial use buildings, in some of these downtown cores that had been pushed out kind of to the suburbs. So that's going to be an issue going forward.
We'll see. And of course, the big story over the last week is we had finally our federal election.
Yes.
And Liberal minority, with Conservatives not that far behind, comparatively speaking. But so I took a survey of all the Western Canadian association heads I could. I talked to Paul DeYoung from the PCA. He said that they definitely, and this is actually a common theme amongst everybody, they want to see some sort of continuity with infrastructure and with the pipeline. The infrastructure was long promised and touted, and there's been kind of a weak sauce rollout, to be honest, of actual projects coming out from the government. There's been a lot of announcements and not so much follow through. At least that's the point of view of these guys. He also said that Bill C-48 and C-69 have done, and I quote, near irreparable damage it's what we've been talking about before, where people say that investors from out of the country don't want to invest in us because we kind of renege on stuff like the pipeline, even though the pipeline is being built. Chris Atchison of the VCCA, he said the same thing, and that he thinks the pipeline will happen, and he thinks infrastructure will happen, but they've got to get on it. He also said that the BC government has kind of been a model as to how to get through with a minority government, and maybe the federal government, the federal Liberals, could take some clues from that, because they've been around for 3 years now, and it's a minority government. It's as minority as it gets. So so they have pulled that off. Tom Sigurdsson, said he thinks the pipeline is going to happen, and the NDP will have nothing to do with it because the Conservatives and Liberals will just collaborate on it, which makes a lot of sense. He also said the divisive nature of the election isn't healthy, because basically I think the Conservatives won bits of Atlantic Canada and they just swept Saskatchewan and Alberta, but they didn't get barely anything in Quebec or Ontario where they expected to get something. And he said that happened with the Liberals in Atlantic Canada, and it wasn't healthy then, and the whole Conservative thing isn't healthy now because it just kind of pits one side against the other.
Yeah, you have Middle Canada, the
nobody's agreeing,
who didn't elect Trudeau.
Yeah.
And
are already mad at him.
Aren't going to feel represented, right?
Mm-hmm. And so the next time an infrastructure thing doesn't come their way, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, so potentially, Trudeau may try and extend somewhat of an olive branch to the prairie provinces with, pipelines and various energy projects to help improve their economic situation.
Yeah, it's likely that's
which would
happen.
Go miles and miles for improving their view of him. Is they've been under such a horrible economic weight for the past several years.
And the prairies have never been Liberal friendly. Even when the first time around, like when Trudeau got in with a clean sweep, it wasn't all that clean in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. I also talked to Fiona Famluck. She said there's pros and cons to this whole thing. She said there's stability with infrastructure, and like that, I can see that continue. But she said also because it's a minority government, they have to take other perspectives into account, which might actually be helpful.
Right.
Her main thing was that she wants to see the government promote across the country construction as a career of choice, and get men and women and people from outside Canada. She's like, we're going to need everybody.
Just a national recruitment effort.
Yeah. If you look, and not even international, like she's all for foreign workers, obviously Canadian workers first, but foreign workers as well, because she's like, we are going to need absolutely everyone. If you look at how much demand is coming for construction stuff, you are going to need people from out of the country as well.
Right. Well, I read a recent, the BC Construction Association released a recent, their fall stat pack, which showed that the demand for workers in the future was coming down, but it wasn't because we were necessarily meeting it. That's part of it. We are doing better, but it was just because some major projects were canceled.
Right.
So all it takes to kind of swing that pendulum of worker demand is just a tiny handful of major projects, and then all of a sudden you have a humongous demand for skilled workers.
It's hard to predict.
Yeah.
But then you also got the retirement thing. So I also went to the VCCSA's Health and Safety Conference last week, and I have some interviews coming up. One of them is with Sasha Brown. She's an audiologist with WorkSafe BC, and she explained the different kinds of hearing damage and the different ways you can mitigate it to the point you can mitigate it on a construction site. And the other one was with Shalinda Shafi. She's an occupational environmental hygiene master's student at UBC, and she wrote a report with her colleague Ed Chesser, and it's all about the different kind of vacuums you can use on site to prevent silica getting in your lungs.
Is that like hood fans? Or?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Like it's super technical. It's the kind of thing that unless you're in the business, you don't think about. You just go, a vacuum. But there's way more to it than that, and they explain that. So,
wow.
So up next, we're going to have those two interviews, starting with Sasha Brown.
This feature interview is brought to you by the Greater Toronto Sewer and Water Main Contractors Association, building water and sewer infrastructure excellence since 1957.
I'm here with Sasha Brown from WorkSafe BC. She just gave a talk at the BCCSA's Health and Safety Conference about hearing loss and about hearing in the construction industry. So I guess my number one question would be, The construction industry is, I think everybody knows, one of the noisiest there is.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the toughest to avoid the noise. So how does one, if one's working as a construction worker or a foreman or whatever, how do they avoid the noise?
Well, as you said, it's hard to avoid the noise per se, but certainly if there's any ways to reduce the noise, whether that be, as I'd mentioned even in the talk, adding oil to a piece of equipment or moving an air compressor further away because it doesn't need to be right next to you. So it's more about, or apply a muffler if that's the case, fix things. So there's ways to reduce the noise. It might not reduce it to a level where it's no longer a hazard. So then we're really down to PPE, which is hearing protection. And when it gets to hearing protection, the biggest thing is making sure that it's worn properly, and it's worn improperly so often that that becomes the biggest thing. Is to protect one's own hearing, is to make sure that they're wearing something that fits properly, because size, they're not one size fits all, for example. So. Yeah.
And another thing you noted is that the construction has a slightly higher amount of noise. So you actually, maybe before I say anything, explain the term NIHL.
Yeah, so NIHL is noise-induced hearing loss. So it's hearing loss that is specific to, it's a kind of hearing loss that's caused by noise, and so it's a very specific region in the inner ear that's affected by noise specifically. And so that's what we look at, and that's what we call noise-induced hearing loss. It's a permanent hearing loss, so there's no fixing it. And yes, so we're seeing higher rates of that within the construction industry than in other industries, which sort of points to, as you said before, high noise levels, but also there are other noisy industries that we're not seeing that same high rate, and so some of it probably comes down to actually understanding the impact of noise, and by that I mean understanding the implications of long durations of exposure to lower levels of noise, like that 85 dBA.
And maybe you've said that the more education and training that happens, the less you see that. So maybe you could explain how WorkSafe BC, for instance, does that.
Yeah, so education and training is really where, at least I'd say we, but certainly I am trying to focus on, that's why I'm here, for instance, is that there's a lot of evidence to show that the more a worker or employer or anybody is aware of the effects of noise and the effects of noise on their own hearing, the more likely they are to make changes and do things to protect it. And so at WorkSafe BC, we're really trying to make resources that are accessible and usable for everybody, for workers, for employers, for supervisors, and tweak them so that they're useful. And ultimately, I said it before, but I'm looking for feedback on whether they actually are, because it's easy for me to think they are, but I want feedback on whether they actually are having my intended consequence of helping.
And you said the expense of these things, like
yes.
I think 25 million or around that was floated as how much hearing aids cost just in BC alone?
Yes, just in BC alone. So $25 million a year on hearing aids, and over $1 million just on the hearing aid batteries. So we spend a lot of money, and it's not in part because hearing aids are expensive, but we don't pay that high rate. It's just the volume. Is that we have that many noise-induced hearing loss claims. And
one other interesting thing you pointed out is that besides the actual hearing loss, there's a whole bunch of other conditions like cardiovascular conditions, dementia that get affected by this. Maybe you could explain why that is.
Yeah, and so with the heart conditions, I mean, noise actually has an impact on sort of our central nervous system, which releases adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones, and things like that to keep our body ready and primed to react and do things. And so if that's constantly being stimulated, we're constantly releasing those things, and those things tend to constrict our blood vessels, which ultimately can lead to hypertension. They do things like affect our digestion, so they change how we digest glucose, so that can contribute to diabetes. So there's all these things that can cause these cardiovascular effects ultimately. They also can cause, of course, sleep disturbances if it's noisy while you're trying to sleep. They can also just be annoying, which can have its own effects. So that's really sort of the links to cardiovascular disease. With dementia, it's more around hearing loss in general. They're starting to show some correlations between loss of sensory input and increased chances of dementia.
Okay, and finally, if I'm a smaller or even a bigger company that wants to address this problem head on, presumably you guys are there to help.
Yeah.
How do they go about doing that?
So I mean, my first bit of advice would be make sure people get annual hearing tests. I mean, that really is key, and it's not even just about the hearing test, but about the information that each person gets at the point of their hearing test. That kind of goes with the education and training. And I mean, from a WorkSafe BC perspective, we try and make that as easy as possible by having lots of industrial audiometer technicians who are able to do that and certified to do that and motivated to do that. And so, and then again, when it comes to education and training in general, we try to have lots of resources, like those 3 new videos that are excellent but unable to see today.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm here at the VCCS Health and Safety Conference with
Shalinda Shafi.
And Ed Chesser.
And we just walked out of a session on vacuums and silica, and they know far better than I do how one thing affects the other. So maybe you guys could explain what your study was about and the different kind of vacuums people can use.
Okay, so basically we are looking at vacuums as they're being used in the construction industry. So vacuums are normally used to control silica dust. And the study is looking at all the different factors that affect the performance of vacuums, because we don't really know how well they're performing when they are on actual construction sites.
Yes, so this is a subject I've been interested in for a while, and there's quite substantial differences, well, Shalinda's research showed, in the actual performance of vacuum cleaners when they're brand new, but also after they've been used on a construction site for a while. And yes, like any other piece of equipment, if you don't maintain it, the performance goes downhill. So we wanted to see what's really happening, and hopefully encourage people to get vacuum cleaners that are easy to maintain and learn how to maintain them properly. That's our long-term goal, because more airflow means less dust for the guy working the tools. And obviously if you don't have much airflow at all, you've got clouds of dust flying, even though you've got a vacuum cleaner system connected, and that's not healthy.
And it seems like people know about silica, but it's not quite the level of awareness you'd think it would be. It's a relatively new development. People are looking at this as a hazard.
Well, not really. There was a guy named Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman consultant sent to Spain to check out silicosis in the miners there.
Okay.
And was the first guy to sort of document what was happening with the scarring in the lungs. So we've known about it for almost 2,000 years. And yes, there were some people aware and using vacuum cleaners fairly effectively in Vancouver 30 years ago. That's when it really started to take hold here. But it's been very slow to grow and spread. There are, say, a few pioneers that have been maintaining and using vacuum cleaners well for quite a while, and lots of others that haven't really got into it. But it has become an emphasis in the last number of years for the Compensation Board and for OSHA down in the States.
Okay.
And I think we can thank the epidemiologists partly for that, for recognizing it's causing lung cancer as well as silicosis. And there's other studies that have shown it causes asthma problems, various other issues for people. So we understand better the importance of controlling it now than what we used to.
And what were your key takeaways from your study, Shalinda?
Basically, people have to know that all vacuums are slightly different, so they have to make an effort to make sure they know exactly what vacuums they're using and how to maintain it. And I think training is an important key. It's we have people who are just picking up a vacuum and not really learning about how to use it before they start using it, and they might not maintain it properly, and that causes further issues down the road.
And you guys did this in partnership with the VCCS, right? And what was their role and what was your role?
So VCCS is the funder they provided funding for the research, and
they help with arranging study sites too.
Yeah, they were basically how we got in touch with a lot of different construction companies that participated in the research.
And I believe they have a silica tool that they've created. Do you guys use that for your research?
Not directly. It was
earlier research has helped create that too.
Yes.
Okay.
And yes, not being contractors, we don't have a need to go directly into it to figure out how to control silica dust. But that's what it's there for, is to help contractors understand and identify effective control measures.
Okay, and you've got a device that people can't see, but I'll just describe it. It's sort of like kind of like from Ghostbusters, actually. It's got a tube and a sort of device, sort of reading thing on top. And so, what is this device?
Well, this is 2 feet of 2-inch plastic pipe with a pressure gauge and a sensor connected into it. And what we do, we connect the vacuum cleaner hose into one end, and it measures the amount of pressure that the pressure difference the vacuum cleaner creates as it drags air through here. And that pressure difference is proportional to the square root of the airflow. So we can calculate from that pressure difference how much airflow that vacuum cleaner is pulling through the hose.
And this is something pretty much any contractor could probably build in their spare time. I know I couldn't, but I'm pretty sure they could.
An unskilled tradesman put one together just recently. Yes. So yes, we'll be happy to send the plans, the where you get the pressure gauge and the sensor, and most people can find the pipe and the little fittings we use to mount the pressure gauge on the pipe. You're good to go.
Okay. And are there any other takeaways you think from the study or from what you found in the field that you think the industry should be aware of?
Well, I would like to see all construction sites equipped with an airflow measuring device like this, so they can check for themselves how well their vacuum cleaner is working. And obviously, if it isn't providing the right airflow, get it fixed or get a better vacuum cleaner.
Okay. And anything from you, Shalyn?
Yeah, like Ed said, people, they don't normally check whether their vacuum is working. So they get a vacuum, especially if you're renting. They rely on the rental company to do the servicing. So when you get the vacuum, you don't actually know whether it's producing enough airflow. So if they could check it, that'll be one big good step for them.
Okay, thanks.